What's good, people? That's the Don here with another installment of the Hustle Investing Podcast, where we inspire and empower people to invest. Why do we inspire and empower people to invest? To improve the life of ourselves and the people around us. And what I want to talk to y'all today about is the best investment that I realized I could make in myself. I came around finally and realized that the best investment I could make is in myself. Okay? And there's a few reasons why, and I'm going to go into this. But basically, to give y'all some context, I've been doing some studying, taking a course recently to go into the investment field. It's called the Canadian Securities Course, CSC. And it's like the first course you do before you go into the investing field, at least securities field here in Canada. And I realized I finally came around to the idea that the best investment I can make is in myself. I don't know if you guys see my first podcast. I said own yourself. Own yourself is important, and it's important to be able to own yourself by having equity in things that you use, companies that you use, things like that. That's important, and that's a good philosophy, and it's worked out for me. But there's kind of an elephant in the room there, which is like, how are you going to get the money to invest in yourself? And I talked about that. I said be useful, right? Being useful is very important. Be useful, and it's a great principle right there. Like, do what you can to be useful, whether it's picking up the night shift or working more hours, and that's good to start for sure. Especially when especially if you are in a shit situation. Like I was in a shit situation, and I needed to get out of that situation. Like I was in a mountain full of debt, and I was working a minimum wage job, and I was the one hammer. I had a hammer and I had a nail, and that was the nail and the hammer that I had, just work hard, be useful. But I realized like a part of being useful is investing in yourself, and investing in yourself, you can be more useful the more you invest in yourself. Now, the reason why I say this is because to give you all some context, like in my situation, I was working skip the dishes, making close to minimum wage. And maybe a little above minimum wage, taxes, expenses, all that included. And yeah, I was working that for a while. And the reason why I was even working that in this first situation is because I didn't go through the trouble of investing in myself, right? Like 18 years old, I was great in school. I was really good in school. I was good in social studies, language arts, math. Science, I wasn't that good at. But I had the skills to be able to move forward in life and the ability to move forward in life. I had the language skills, all that stuff. And the competency, and then my last year of high school, I blew my education career path away totally. A lot of things were happening at home. I was dealing with a lot of mental problems, and to those who know me, know that I've dealt with a lot of mental health problems throughout my from 18 until about 24. So it's only recently that I've been really stable mentally. And so anyway, it's not an excuse, it's just what it is. And so during that period from 18 to 24, I was really going through a period of figuring out myself, figuring out my health, figuring out what was wrong with me, figuring out my medication, but also figuring out like what I like to do and what's true, what's real, and what works, especially in the field of business and investing. And that's why I started companies like this, Hip Hop Certified. That was one of the companies that I started. I started Donation Music Group, Sound Movement, Hip Hop Heads at 16 years old. I was selling cannabis. I was doing all kinds of stuff to try and start a business. And now with Hustle Investing Podcast, Hustle Merch, Hustle Music, I've been trying to figure out this thing for a long time, And I realized that one of the key pieces that I was missing was investing in myself. Now, people would tell me when I was 18 years old, man, go get an education. And since I blew that last year of high school, it didn't really matter to me. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm going to go back to doing this shit? It's so stupid. And all the people I looked up to were rappers. And all the rappers that I looked up to, none of them, as far as I know, most of them didn't go to university. And so I sort of took that out of context, their situations in that piece of information. And I said, oh, well, I'm not going to go to university, without understanding the larger macro environment that I was in, And so, and it's not a regret thing, but it just is what it is. And so I took that out of context and said, no, I'm going to be a rapper and I'm going to do this career path and I'm going to try and figure out music. And that in itself isn't bad. But when you don't have a plan, you don't really know what you're doing, that either is going to work or it's not going to work. And for me, it kind of worked, but it really, in the long term, didn't work to the point where I could start making income from this stuff. And I realized that it doesn't work for most people in the city. I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and it's a little crazy in a macro perspective to think that somebody who looks like me, comes from where I come from, can become a successful hip hop artist here in Calgary, Alberta. That's what I thought. I had a lot of things in my head. And so that's the path that I tried to pursue. And I made some cool things happen and made some things happen. But now that I'm 26 and I'm like, oh, okay, music stuff really hasn't taken off. I need to figure out a way to make income. Because with this inflation that's happened over the past 3-4 years, 5 years, I should say, my income has not gone up, but all my expenses have. So now I'm working more and more hours to make the same amount of money. And it didn't make sense. And so that's why I learned about investing. And I think it all happens for a reason. Because if I went to university, I probably would have picked some liberal arts degree, and I would have picked something that would have really made either I wasn't going to be happy or not making income with. And then I would have picked something that I would have regretted, and I had all this student debt, and I'd been working skip the dishes and trying to pursue this rap career anyway. So I'm grateful for how things worked out, because I think they were all worked out in the way it was supposed to work out. In the fact that I was able to pursue my passion, see how it was to do that and fail multiple times and see what works and what doesn't work and see what I'm interested in and what I'm not interested in, what's the truth, what's not the truth, figuring out that on my own, and then seeing this investing stuff seems to work for me. I'm decent at it. It makes money, and then going down that path and really doubling down on that path. If I would have just went into university straight out of high school, I don't think I would have figured that out on my own. And so that's why I'm grateful for the path that I went down. But now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, investing, there's a clear path to not only start a business, but actually earn more income and do this for it to make sense. And I'm interested in them. It's almost as interesting to me it's just as, if not more interesting to me, that the investing stuff as hip hop was and is to this day, if not more interesting. And so that's why I was like, okay, this makes sense for me to go down. And then I realized for me to really move forward in that career, in that industry, to go high leverage, it makes sense for me to invest in myself, which is get certifications, get the education so I can work in that industry and really build something of my own. And that's where investing myself clicked in, where I was like, oh no, I need to invest in myself. And I know what that means, right? And so with the help of ChatGPT, I figured out there's a lot of things you can do in this industry where you can invest in certificates or get designations and invest in yourself. And I was like, oh, that's sick. It's like a game that has steps to it, because with this music shit, there was really no steps to it. There was really no ABC to it. It was a very abstract thing. And unless you were in a city that really was promoting that stuff, very pro-friendly hip-hop, like you're in New York or Toronto or LA, and you have infrastructure that's already existing for these sort of artists, and you can just plug in with that infrastructure, figuring out that infrastructure and trying to build that infrastructure is just a whole thing in itself. And so, that was a whole thing that I went through, right? And so now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, invest in yourself. It makes sense. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this podcast. Invest in yourself. And the more I do this course, the CSC course, the more I realize and learn about things that I didn't really understand. And now I have words to them. Now I have an awareness about what I'm going through and what I went through. And in this course, in the third section, the third section is called the economy. They talk about this concept of unemployment, underemployment. And I realized that I was, there's two terms here. One is unemployment, which is taking the labor force and then taking those in the labor force and seeing who is not employed but looking for employment. And I wasn't unemployed, I had employment. But then it went on further to talk about underemployment, which is somebody that is working a part-time job that's not suited to their skills. So they're really able to do more, but they're working a part-time job or some sort of job that's not utilizing their skills, underemployment. And I realized that I was underemployed. I was like, bro, there's no reason why I'm working a job that people who work this job generally barely can speak English. You know what I mean? Like, if you see the skip the dishes drivers, a lot of these people either just got here, they're trying to figure out a way to make more income, and this is a very temporary job for them. And like, there's no reason why somebody who grew up out here in America and in Canada, did all his schooling in Canada and America, is working skip the dishes at 26 years old. It doesn't make sense. And so that's how, like, okay, I'm definitely underemployed. You know, my skills are not being used properly, and I have the ability and competency to be able to do more. And there's a loss of productivity in the economy when you have a lot of people doing that. And then I realized, like, okay, underemployment's a problem, and that's the situation I'm going through, but why am I underemployed? And then I realized, like, sure, the mental health problems was a part of it, but another part of it was something that another term that I learned here, structural unemployment. And structural unemployment is basically, it's the same idea around underemployment, but it's an unemployment that's caused by a mismatch of skills, job, labor, with the person that's trying to go out and find jobs. And so what I noticed is there's a lot of people here in Calgary that went down this hip hop path that are structurally unemployed or underemployed. And the reason is because they learned all these skills like hip hop and rap and music and beat production and mixing and mastering and all this stuff. I'm not saying you can't make a career out of that. A lot of people did, but a lot of people went down this hip hop path and then they realized, like, oh shit, I'm in Calgary. You know what I mean? And this led to a lot of people having to find some other job or working a part-time job to try and focus on their full-time passion. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but a lot of people end up in the situation that I was in where they're underemployed. They have the skill set and the ability and competency to contribute more to society, but they're stuck in some part-time job, or they might be even unemployed. And so I knew this was true because I see people on Instagram. I know people in this industry. And there was this guy who was on EI for a while, and he was trying to fund the music career. And I'm like, yeah, like, that's a perfect example of somebody who's structurally unemployed, you know? And so what that person either has to do when they're structurally unemployed is to move cities, or they have to retrain their skills to fit the economy that they're in locally. And that's the situation that I was in. I feel for that. Where I was structurally underemployed. I had skill sets in an industry that was not really vibrant here in Calgary. I had a skill set that was useful maybe in Toronto, New York, Atlanta, maybe Miami, maybe LA, Oakland, but not here. Not here in Calgary, you know, and that's just reality. And so this is the situation I was in 2-3 years ago, where my friend, Junie, shout out to Junie. If you need a mortgage, you can hit him up. Shout out to Junie, my best friend. Check out his information right here. You can call or text him to get a mortgage. And so there's his contact information. And Junie's killing it. Junie is a very smart guy, and he's killing it in business. And he told me, like, 2-3 years ago, before he was really taking off on his business, and he told me, like, man, like, you need to either move cities and double down on this music stuff, or you need to learn something else. And there was a lot of impediments to me moving. I could have moved to Toronto and try and make this rap career work. And a lot of people do that. But it didn't make sense for me. Because I was like, how am I going to find a job? Sure, I could have worked skip. Where am I going to live? How much is it going to cost? And then there's my medication, which is and family support. It's like, if I go off my meds, do I have anybody that's going to be there to support me? So I had a lot of things that were keeping me in Calgary. It's just what it is. And I was like, all right, well, I tried to make this thing work here for a while. And I was like, okay, I'm beating a dead horse here. Something's not working. And then I realized there wasn't so much about my lack of skills or ability or effort. It was more about the macro environmental situation that I was in, where it's just like there's just really not an industry for that here. You know what I mean? And not only is there not an industry for that, but the industry, like in itself, is very hard to make income in. So it's like not only are you picking an industry to go into, which is the music industry, that has seen a lot of changes in the past 10 years, especially with streaming, and seeing record label revenues, seeing people's revenues dramatically decline. You know what I mean? Maybe not the top 1%, but the 99%. People used to be able to sell CDs, and people know what happened to the music industry. Everything went to streaming, and everyone's getting paid pennies for their music. Artists complain about this all the time. So it's like, not only did you not see the puck going that way, but it's like you picked an industry that's extremely hard to go into and make income in general, regardless of what city you're in. You could be in Toronto, New York, whatever. But then on top of that, you're in Calgary. So it's like you mash those things together. You have to mount the insurmountable almost, you know? That's why as far as I know, not a single person in the city who's really making music are making money strictly off of their music on a passive income level. Maybe there is, but not that I'm aware of or that I know, you know? And so there's people that have made income with it, money, decent money too, but not to the point where they're sustaining themselves with it. And maybe there's a gang of people there, but I wasn't privy to those people. And so I realized that, and I was like, okay, like something here doesn't make sense. So that's why I went down the investing path. And I was like, this automatically in my first 2 years, I'm making more income investing than I ever did doing music. That makes more sense to me, you know? And so to bring it all back to the point of investing in yourself, what you have to do if you're in that situation, bro, if you're in that situation, you follow me because you're in the music industry or whatever, you see me, I look cool or whatever, just know you invest in yourself. And what that means is like, be useful. It goes back to that point of being useful, but really like I wouldn't call it advice, but this is the point where I'm at, where I'm like, I got to invest in myself, bro. I got to get the skills and the acknowledgements of greater society to be like, okay, this motherfucker can actually make something happen here. You know what I mean? Like he has the skills and the knowledge base to make something work. And I fought that for years. I fought that idea for years. I'm telling you, I was like, no, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to get it out the mud. I'm going to figure it out on my own. And I'm telling you, 26 years old, I'm like, this just makes sense to me. So that's the point where I'm at now, where it's like to not be structurally underemployed, unemployed, or underemployed in general, or structurally unemployed, to contribute to economic activity, to contribute to the greater good of society, to evolve. And to improve the life of myself and the people around me, I need to invest in myself. You know, and so that's the point where I'm at now. I'm like, let me get these starts and we'll see. Maybe I'll go down this route and be like, okay, well, banking industry is really out east and I need to do real estate here or something. It's things that we'll figure out along the way. It'll get figured out. But regardless of whatever the situation is, like I'm confident this makes more sense to me, you know? And if it doesn't make sense in 5 years, then we'll figure it out from there. But at least hopefully we'll be further along and we won't be making minimum wage. So, you know, we'll see. But anyway, that's just what it is. So invest in yourself, be useful. It's the best investment you can make. Warren Buffett said it. Alex Hormozi has said it. So many people have said it. Invest in yourself. And I've finally come around to the bandwagon. Invest in yourself. And this is why people go to university for the first 4 years after they're outside of high school. I didn't realize that. I was like, man, go university to go get a job. It's like, it's not about that. It's not really about the job that you're going to get. That's what it looked like to me. I was like, I'm going to go to university to get a job. It's like, no, bro, you're going to go to university to get skills, connections, and experience so then you can actually be useful in the real world. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, yeah, like that's why. I didn't realize that, you know? And so when people would tell me year and year after year, job after job, go back to school, go back to school. People that generally meant well. And I was like, now I'm at the point where I'm like, I think they actually were right. You know, and so this is just a nod to all those people that told me that. And so, yeah. And even if I'm going to bring this back to a music industry thing, because I understand the music industry to a certain degree as well. Where even if you want to go down the music industry, you're like, you know, I'm going to double down on this music industry. I'm going to go so hard and do this music industry. I'm like, kudos to you, bro. You are a fucking G, and I respect that. But even in that, you should probably, I mean, I wouldn't say you should because I don't want to tell people what to do, but I'm like, that was the path that I was at, where I was like, I was stuck between these two paths. I'm like, either I'm going to go down this music industry or I'm going to go down the investing industry. And I picked the investing industry to double down on. But music industry, even if someone's going to do that, it makes sense for them to go get either there's all kinds of things out there. There's courses on entrepreneurship, digital marketing, photography, videography, music mixing, mastering. Like I actually got a certificate in this stuff, believe it or not. It's back here. Can't see it, but a digital audio certificate of achievement. I wasn't even in a space because I was dealing with all these mental health problems to even comprehend what I was learning at the time. But those are real certificates you can get. Those are real courses you can get to invest in yourself and really make something happen. And the industry is mature enough to the point where it's like there are courses, there are information for people to get those skill sets so they can be even more useful there, you know? So even in that situation where you're like, yeah, bro, I'm going to take this music industry, invest in the skills to be useful in that industry. And that's really what it is at the end of the day. Whatever thing you're interested in, invest in the skills, if it's a certificate, it's a skill set, it's a product, it's whatever it is. Invest in the skills so then you can be useful, you know? And so that's what I'm learning. That's what it is. Invest in yourself. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm around to it. Peace. And I just want to add this as well in there too, because I forgot to add this. I was watching the video and I wanted to add this in there. Part of the reason why I came to the realization that I needed to invest in myself is the fact that I'm in Canada. And what does that mean? Canada equals regulation. For those that are outside of Canada watching this in the USA, Canada equals regulation, bro. For you to make any sort of real money here, you're going to have to go through some sort of regulatory body. That's just been my experience. You go to some regulatory body or some sort of thing to be like, okay, you can actually do XYZ thing here, you know? And a lot of that, it comes from government regulation, trying to keep things safe and stable and whatever. And so, like, I saw what it was like for my parents to move to the US illegally, get papers there to live there illegally, and build a business and be productive, you know, and actually like thrive and buy us a home and have a higher quality of life, standard of living than we do here in Canada, you know, being that even though they were illegal, you know. And so I saw that and then I saw what it was like for my parents to move here and have that same mentality. And it's like, it doesn't work here. It doesn't work to the same degree that it does in America. You know, my dad constantly talks about that over the phone. He complains a lot, but he's got a good point. Where the fact that, like, man, in the US, you could get cheap labor. It was easy for him to get cheap labor. Here, everyone wants to get paid whatever amount of dollars to get anything done. And not only that, but like, for you to really get anything done is going through these regulatory bodies. For you to drive, you have to get a license. To handle liquor, you have to get some sort of license, some sort of certification. Cannabis, poker dealing, gambling, real estate, investments, driving a forklift. Like, for you to make any sort of real money here, it probably you're going to go at some point through some regulatory body and get some certification. So this is not America. And I fought that for years. You know, those who know me know that I have a very American mentality because of the way I grew up in America. I lived there for 10 years. I was a child when my parents brought me there. I grew up very American. And then coming here with that same mentality, it works to a certain degree, but it doesn't work to the same degree that it does in America. Where, like, you can get these stories of people that come from immigrant backgrounds, start a business, go there, become multimillionaires. And you don't really see that here, bro. And so it really doesn't happen that often here. You know what I mean? Not that I see. And so that was the point where I was like, hey, well, for me to really make any sort of real income here, I'm going to have to invest in myself, which means get a certificate, a degree, some sort of designation, something so I can get income and really work in some industry that I not only am interested in, but makes money, you know? And so that was part of the reasons that why I invested in myself. It's like, yeah, like this is such a regulated country. This is just the name of the game here, you know, and that's partly why the reason why I want conservatives to win. I don't know. Today's the election. Who knows who's going to win? But it's like there's so much fucking regulation. For you to cut hair, there's a regulation. There's some sort of regulatory body to go through. So it's like a lot of this stupid stuff. You know, you may have practiced medicine or dentistry in one province and go to another province. You have to go through more regulation and more studies and more exams. And it's like, it's stupid. And that's what they're talking about in this election, to cut down some of this red tape. And I think Canada would really benefit from that for the most part, and take a page out of the Americans' playbook to really deregulate, because it would just mean so much more productivity, in my opinion. But yeah, that's just kind of what it is around here. You know, like even to deliver like delivering cannabis was a whole thing for years and years. It's like, oh, we can't deliver cannabis, and it took years for them to finally say, okay, you can finally deliver cannabis. So it's like it's just how it is here in Canada. So, you know, that's part of the reason why I wanted to invest myself, you know, so got to get through these fucking government regulations.